I think it will make a really big difference for a team such as Nepal. Like, for instance, a sports scientist could identify where the best location for you is to play to make it more difficult for opponents coming from overseas. So I was just saying to you before, I would play at the highest level possible, way at high altitude. I'd play in hot temperatures because then your players can adapt to it, and it's going to make it more difficult for players coming from overseas, such as Australia or in other countries.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
So hello, a very warm welcome to the VAR Show, the show which talks about all the various major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to conduct a theme of interviews, and we have one of Australia's leading sports scientists, Dr. Craig Duncan, with us. So without wasting much time, I would like to first thank Dr. Craig for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
I'm very, very well, and thank you. It's very nice to be on the show with you, and so thank you, and hello to everyone that's listening. At the moment, because of the pandemic, it's a little bit different for me, because normally I travel a lot around the world, because I consult to a lot of teams in Australia, in Asia, Europe, South America. So normally I travel quite extensively, but now at the moment I'm based in Sydney and just monitoring data and working with coaches from a distance.
Of course, and you are very much into sports science. At least that was what I could infer from whatever I read about you online. And many of our listeners do not know what sports science is. That's a basic truth. So can you please explain a little bit what it is?
Well, really, sports science is, the way I see it, it's quite a large area, but it's very much about everything that's sort of the off-field, the fitness for the players, it incorporates nutrition, the psychology, injury prevention, strength, speed, power, all these sort of things that go and help the footballer to be better. But also it incorporates analysis as well. So, analyzing games, sports scientists would do that. I actually really probably call myself more a human performance sort of scientist. So, everything that is involved in football in respect to getting the players ready so the coach can coach them, really increasing their fitness, increasing their ability on the field.
Of course, like you said, you consider yourself more like a human coach, performance coach. So what is the difference between maybe a sports scientist and what you said?
Look, I don't think it's too much different, except I take a very holistic perspective to what I do. I look at the player from many different angles to make sure that they're ready physically and psychologically to do what the coach requires them to do tactically.
Of course, and of course, for me personally, I know I've been exposed to sports science because of my friends who have done similar stuff. But how important is sports science according to you?
I think it's very important. Look, football is a game that you need to be physically very good at the highest level. You must be physically very good, psychologically good. We must be able to analyze the games appropriately. We need to be able to manage players so when they play, they're physically right to play and ready to play. What they eat, what they drink, how much effort that they do in training, the management of training loads. It's very important if we want to maximize the potential of the players that we work with. In actual fact, I think sports science would be very positive for teams such as Nepal, and I work with other teams, that need that could really benefit from this area, that mightn't be as good technically or have the best players. Okay, but if you're very fit and very healthy, then it's going to work very well for you.
Of course, and I wanted to ask you, you said, it's good, it will be beneficial for a team like Nepal, and Like, how much of a difference does having like implementing a good sports science base in your team and without implementing, how much of a difference does it make for a team?
I think it will make a really big difference for a team such as Nepal. Like, for instance, a sports scientist could identify where the best location for you is to play to make it more difficult for opponents coming from overseas. So I was just saying to you before, I would play at the highest level possible, way at high altitude. I'd play in hot temperatures because then your players can adapt to it, and it's going to make it more difficult for players coming from overseas, such as Australia or in other countries.
Of course, and like I'll go a bit personal. And when did you decide to get associated with sports science?
Look, I was a football player, and then I did my undergraduate degree in sports science, and then my postgraduate, and obviously then my doctorate in the sports science field. So when I thought that I'm not going to be good enough to be a player, I thought, well, the next best thing is to be involved in the sport by, being in this side of the game.
Of course, and like sports science of late, at least it has come into the mainstream market, especially with like the household names like maybe United, Liverpool, or the Premier League teams. Like showcasing that okay, we have a department with this. So, is it something that is recently a recent thing that has come up, or is it something that has been for a long while but neglected?
I think that it's been there for a long while and it's been neglected. And then the other thing is maybe sports science wasn't specific enough to football. So we have to look at football specifically and see how sports science can benefit the football coach. Really my job is making the coach's job easier by giving him the information he needs on his players so he knows that they can perform to what he needs them to do.
So, like you earlier, you said that you have been traveling. You travel all around the globe. Like providing consultancy. Look, and so how much do you have to adapt? Like to the situation where you are working at the moment. Do you have to change how you work?
Yeah, look, at the moment, very much a lot of it's online, but I'm sort of used to doing that, from a virtual perspective. So one of my teams that I work with is in the J League. So, in the Japanese league, they're there. So I will speak to the coach. I will get the data through WhatsApp or email or whatever, and then I can look at that data and then speak to the coach and identify, what players are in good shape, ready to play. Is the team, performing physically the way it should? So, I'm quite used to doing that. So it just means that I can't be there face to face.
Of course, and you spoke about another important. You used the word data, and that's again another new thing that's being thrown around because of the maybe like how the top teams have used. Has technology evolved with sports science, and has it been how did you have to adapt to it, because you have been in the game for quite a while now, and maybe it was not there earlier?
Yeah, very much. But look, Australia, I'm very fortunate. Australia is one of the leaders in the world in sports science. So for instance, GPS, you might have seen players using GPS to see how many meters they do at the game and different speeds and that. Look, I've been using GPS since 2002 when it first came out. So many, many years ago. So I was able to adapt and then see the evolution of that. So there's a lot of the technology that is out now that I've been involved with from the start, and helped the companies develop that technology.
Yeah, and like staying with GPS, I have seen a lot of them use it, and I've even spoken to one owner of the company. What is the use of a GPS? What do you do with it?
Well, basically, the GPS tells you exactly what the player has done in training and in a game situation. So what we know is, or what we do, how we use GPS is, in respect to training, we identify exactly how many kilometers should be run, at what speeds, etc. So we predict the outcome of the training session based on what the coach wants to achieve. The players wear the GPS, and we can see if what they do matches what we predicted they should do. So ultimately, they're ready to perform when they have to perform. We use it in game situations to identify exactly what each individual player has done physically in that game. Because we've been doing this for so long, we know what the world's best players do in every position, in pretty much every tactical formation. So we know what the gold standard is for a player, and then we try and match that. So we try and build that and identify where players are at in respect to this performance criteria.
Of course, and you're like on a personal level, are you only do you only work with football teams and players, or do you work with other sports also?
Yeah, look, football is the sport I primarily work with, but yes, I do, because of my success in football, I do work in other sports as well. So I have a company called Performance Intelligence Agency, and so we work across sports. So some Australian sports that you might know, like such as rugby league, but we've also worked in basketball, Olympic type sports as well. So any sport, we can really adapt our processes to work with the clients.
So across the genre of sports, does your work kind of remain the same, like what you do?
Yeah, look, there are some sports such as like cycling where sports science is very, very big, and it's very well accepted. Some of the Olympic sports as well. It differs somewhat among the team sports, but it's very powerful with international teams. Like, for example, I did the last World Cup with the Australian national team, but for those 4 years, there's extensive travel around the world that players need to do. So a sports scientist can manage when the players sleep, monitor how they sleep, maximizing their potential to perform when they have to perform. Like, there's things that we can do to help these situations. If they have to perform in the heat, how can we get them ready to perform in the heat? If they're playing in countries that are in the winter, but then they have to come to UAE or somewhere and play in 38 degrees, even though they're living in England at the same time, and it's only 15 degrees. We need to prepare them for that, and that's what sports science can also do.
Of course, and you spoke about how you worked with the Australian national team, and it's like I wanted to ask you, like you said, like you have to keep on monitoring all throughout the maybe time tenure that you're working with them, and the different pitches or the temperatures or the climates you're going to play at. So do the club side let you work with them?
Yeah, look, what I do is when I'm working with a national team, I develop very good relationships with the clubs that the players are playing at, because it's in the club's best interests that they work with me. So after the FIFA window, after they've played for the national team, that they return to their club in the best possible physical condition.
And you have also worked with the club side with Sydney FC, I think, in Western Sydney Wanderers. How different is it, like working with a club and national side?
Look, a club side is quite different. In a lot of ways, it's easier because you've got the players every day, and you get to see them every day. So you can manage them. You have much more control. So yes, I've worked with multiple clubs in Australia and throughout the world. And even though it's hard work day in, day out, with international teams, you don't have as much control. It's just different. I enjoy both. I've been fortunate to work with a number of international teams, and I enjoy that very much. For instance, with Australia, we won the Asian Cup 2015. I was working with them. Iran, I worked with the Iran national team, very good team, and we lost in the semi-final of the Asian Cup 2019. But I also am very interested in working with countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, Vietnam, even these smaller countries that might know sports science, and developing sports science in those countries. So I would like to see that, and to enhance the education of people that might be interested in being a sports scientist in Nepal. That's a great interest for me, in the future.
Of course, personally, I would love to be a sports scientist going forward, but I don't know whether that's possible or not. And I wanted to ask you, like, suppose if a young guy or a girl who wanted to pursue a career in sports science, what should he or she do to like pursue a career?
Well, I'm not sure of the education process in Nepal, but if there is anything to do with fitness in Nepal, physical education, or anything like that, that is very good to study. However, your background, computer engineering, is also quite interesting because you would have a very good understanding of data. I could work with you. To develop different software that could be very positive in respect to sort science and how we analyze data. Because data that is not analyzed well is no good. What we want to do with that data is to create insight or information for the coaches. So, yeah, I think if people are interested in this field, they might start off studying fitness, physical education, but then you could come to Australia and study sports science, or we could link up with a university in Nepal and develop something in Nepal.
So like I wanted to ask you, is something like sports science for the future, or will it be replaced by something else?
No, I think sports science will be here for a long, long time. I mean, I don't think it will change. I think it will just evolve. So like any area, sports science will evolve and will get better. I think there's a lot to go as technology. The more data that is available, we have to learn how to manage that data, how to visualize that data, and I definitely think it's one that will be here for a long time. However, like any field, if it's not done well, we're always going to have problems, and that's why sports science won't progress. But I do believe it has its place in football. I would love to see it develop in a country like Nepal.
Of course, and like we have spoken quite a while, and it's generally more related to the like physical aspect. Do you also focus on the mental aspects?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the psychology, but I encompass that all into what we do. The mental aspects are very important. And the university that I'm associated with in Australia, the Australian Catholic University, is a leader in high performance sport and the education of students in that area. We really take a holistic view to the athlete. You can't just look at them physically. It's physiological, psychological, sociological even. All these things come into play. And depending on what country you're working in, you've got cultural issues as well, nutritional aspects, different diets. It's just about getting the best for these players to perform.
And ideally, like we speak about mental health, and like how do you analyze the health of a person mentally? Like what do you do? What is the process?
Yeah, look, one of the cornerstones of my work is monitoring athletes on a daily basis. So using basically an app where they answer questions on a daily basis, and one of those questions is how are they feeling psychologically. Also, there's technology you can use that will have give you some idea of their psychology. You can see that ring I'm using now. That's called an Aura ring. That monitors all my sleep and my heart rate and my heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is an interesting one because that can show signs of stress. And when that starts to dip, you can identify, or ask the question, is that physical stress or psychological stress? And to see how the person is coping. Mental well-being is a very important thing. And particularly at this stage during a pandemic where a lot of people and players accordingly are struggling because they might be away from their families and having a difficult time.
So, like I got some few good questions in my mind again. It's like, since you've worked in this part of the world, like with Iran and everything, where maybe the temperatures go very high, like,
Yes.
so do you think like something like water break should be made compulsory?
Look, the water break or the mid break on each half. I mean, FIFA has a rule about that. When it's over a certain temperature, there has to be a break. So that just That's just part of the FIFA rules. And yes, when I've been involved with teams playing in high temperatures, such as in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, yeah, there's been times when those breaks have to happen and occur. It's very difficult playing in high temperatures, but that's why places like Nepal and that have an advantage. You've got to use it to your advantage.
So like, like generally we say that, like you're going to a more, you are going to a place with a higher temperature and it will be difficult to play. But how is it difficult? What makes it difficult for the players?
Well, when you're playing in high temperatures and you're not accustomed to the high temperatures, it just impacts our aerobic system significantly. So it means that we just will get fatigued easier and not be able to run as far in a game, or that we're going to be under that constant pressure, particularly if you haven't had time to adapt to those high temperatures. All right, so it's really going to compromise the aerobic power of an athlete.
Officer, and I'll talk about more of a current affairs. And you have had in the Premier League a lot of managers complaining about how they did not have enough time, like for maybe the pre-season. How important is pre-season for a good season?
Look, I always think whatever's in front of me, that's what you've got to adapt to. If the preseason is 4 weeks, if it's 6 weeks, sometimes in Australia we have a 16-week preseason, so it's very, very long. The secret to a good preseason is that in the off season, you don't get too out of shape, or you don't get to let yourself go too much. But definitely 4 to 6 weeks is adequate to prepare players for a new season. What you need to do is psychologically be prepared after a long season. Sometimes players feel burnt out and exhausted, cognitively exhausted, so their mind is exhausted, so they need to get away, have a break. But physically, at an elite level, we can get players ready in 4 to 6 weeks. There's no problem with that.
Definitely, I wanted to ask you, this upcoming season, at least in terms of the Premier League or in the European season, the season is kind of cramped, and there were also talks of introducing 5 substitutes. Should that have been passed for the Premier League?
I don't like the idea of 5 substitutes. Simply, the reason I don't like the idea of 5 substitutes is I pride myself on getting our teams physically ready. So if I can work on my team, but we're allowed 5 substitutes, I think it takes away from needing the skill of good sports science, because 5 substitutes, that's half the outfield players. True. They just finished off the national competition in Australia, and they allowed 5 substitutes. I don't like 5 substitutes.
So, what's the idea behind allowing 5 substitutes?
I think what they were saying is it was going to reduce the incidence of injury, and because the players mightn't have had a long enough time to prepare. But I think that's part of the game, isn't it? It's like that's part of the skill of preparing players. Get them prepared. The game is 3 substitutes, not 5 substitutes. 5 substitutes for me, it starts to get a bit like ice hockey, doesn't it? Where they change every time. I don't like that.
So, do you think because they have not had enough time to prepare, which was I think the brainchild of having 5 substitutes, you'll see more injuries in the upcoming season?
Look, if players are poorly prepared, if the training loads have not been adequate or they've been too much, players are going to be vulnerable any time of the year. Any season, you always see injuries at the start of a season because players have done too much or maybe too little in the preparation period. So I don't think we should say injuries are related just to COVID-19. Injuries are related to poor preparation. And that's where good sports science can make all the difference.
Of course, and I wanted to ask you, in your experience, do coaches push players a lot more than they should?
Well, yes, I have seen that. But what you try to do is to work with coaches so they can get the best outcome they require, but we also maintain a healthy playing group. So yes, I try and work with coaches to educate them as much as possible to say, yes, we can push them hard. However, if we push them hard the wrong way, physically, the human body won't cope. But yes, we can still train very hard, but do it effectively if we get the training loads managed in the right program.
Of course, and you have also written a lot of books, and I think your new book, I think, is Self Science. What is it? What is that about?
Oh, well, Self Science is more a mainstream book, not just for sports scientists. It's very much about people studying themselves as a scientist. So studying themselves, I call it a study of you by you. So you can become really understanding of what is best for you to make sure you're physically and psychologically right. To understand how much sleep do you need, what sort of exercise are you doing, what food is best for you, because you know what? You're unique. You're 1 in 7.5 billion people. So you're quite different. We are very different to the person next to us or other people. So what we need to do is start becoming a little bit more understanding of ourselves. Like you studied computer science many years. You're a smart person. Do you think you've studied yourself as much as you've studied computer science?
I don't know.
That's right. Well, the number one thing we need to study is ourselves. So that's the book of self-science, and it teaches people about how to do that, and then goes through the fundamentals of basically self-awareness, and for them to learn, how to exercise, what to eat, different parts of their lifestyle. So yeah, it's a new book of mine, just out actually. So that's exciting.
So I wanted to ask you, do you like writing books a lot?
Yes, I actually do. That's my third book, and I think I'll do more. And I also write research papers as well. And I write a blog, my own website where I write on a regular basis. But I do enjoy writing. I think it's an interesting area.
No, like writing a research paper is still fine because you know your domain, what you're going to write for, but writing a book, maybe you have to reinvent yourself every time. How do you do that?
You just need anything in life. You need discipline, to write, and you might set yourself a target of writing 500 words a day, and then you just do it. And but you know what? This last book, I just did it. I wrote and wrote, and but look, it did take a couple of years for it to get done and to finalized and to get it out into print. So look, like anything, it takes work, but it was very enjoyable.
Like, I wanted to ask you, like, even I have aspirations of writing a book someday. I have decided like some topics and all those. How do you come up on the topics that on what your book is going to be based about?
Will you tell me what are those topics? What do you want to write about?
I have a lot. Like, I don't know, like general, like you have your own experiences that you would want to write, maybe in terms of fiction or maybe through just non-fiction. Even you can maybe base it around someone else. So it's just like general. I have no plans of writing like you, like where you have, it's more holistic approach. Like your books are more, which can be even considered maybe somewhere down the line, maybe you can find it in the hand of maybe a sports scientist, like reading it for his exams. So mine is not that genre actually.
No, but I think what you do is you just start to write. Each day you start to write what comes into your mind, and you just write. And don't wait for one day. I heard you say, I'm going to wait for one day. Start it tomorrow. I want to see you start it tomorrow. And then maybe you start a blog, writing each day. My first book actually was from my blog, where I wrote every day or wrote regularly. And then I put all those together, and it was a book somewhere here. It was called Sports Science is Not Rocket Science. And that was my first book. So you could do that. You just start writing every day. You live in an amazing, interesting country. You could just write what you see every day, and I think it would be wonderful.
No, I was just seeing the list of chapter headings that I've written already, but I have stalled it for quite a while now. Like hopefully I'll start writing soon.
Okay, now you tell me what's stopping you starting.
I don't know. You just find an excuse not to start. Like you convince yourself, okay, I'll start tomorrow, which I have to change. But yeah, so that's one excuse that I have for myself, which I have to personally change. I think so.
Okay, I want to see the first chapter soon.
Hopefully. So I'll move on to more other topics. And like I asked few friends, like, okay, what can I ask a sports scientist that is coming? And they also, uh, like work in similar fields. So I have some few maybe more technical questions which I do not know anything about. Maybe. So I'll just
Please.
ask them to you or go from their side. So first one
Yeah.
is caffeine really ergogenic for everyone?
What was that, sorry?
Is caffeine
Yes.
ergogenic for everyone?
That's a very good question. Look, caffeine does enhance our, our performance in respect to that. Studies have shown people that consume caffeine in a short period before they have to perform are able to perform longer at a higher intensity. However, this is where actual self-science comes into it. Does every human be affected by caffeine the same way? The answer is absolutely not. It needs to be practiced to see how it affects you positively. I know people that do not have caffeine, and if they were to have caffeine, they might have some sickness or they mightn't feel so good and it mightn't have that positive effect. But overall, caffeine is very powerful and very good for the majority of players. So yes, in football, I do advocate the use of caffeine, but it has to be in the right format, and it has to be trialed before they're actually using it, and the right quantity as well.
Of course, and so basically, it's like it depends on person to person.
Yes.
Kind of.
What I say is that I want to see people trial it in training or before games, and then we can know. But overall, the question is caffeine good for performance? Yes, it is.
Okay, so do you personally recommend it to your athletes who come to you?
Yes.
Okay, so is it in
I
the form?
I definitely recommend that they try it, and it is a good performance enhancer.
So do you like recommend it in the form of coffee or is it capsules?
You can take it. Look, capsules are very easy because a capsule might be 100 milligrams of coffee, so that's of caffeine. Sorry, so that's good. I know it in that. Yeah, but some people might like it in a short shot of coffee. But when it's measured, I know exactly how much is in it. There are some supplements as well that have a caffeine base. The main thing is not to have too much. Because once you get over a certain quantity, it's not going to have any positive. And so more is not better in respect to caffeine.
Of course, and I'll move on to the next question. And the next one comes something like this: is a low carb, high fat diet effective for athletes?
That's a very good question. And a low carb, high fat diet has become more popular. It depends on the athlete. So friends of mine have done studies with power lifters using a low carb, high fat diet. So obviously they've been able to reduce their weight, but also maintain their strength. So they're being able to compete at a different weight category. However, I've seen some soccer players do it, and if it's done wrong and their body has not had time to adapt, they will struggle. So I don't recommend it to football players. If they really want to go down that track, then I would refer them on to. I've got a very good friend that's very a professor that knows this area very well, and I would refer them to him to follow the regime that he sets out. In actual fact, myself personally, I follow a low carbohydrate diet. But that's just for my health. I find that I function better on that respect. It makes it controlling my weight very easy. And yeah, I've followed such a diet for probably 3.5 years now, and yeah, I won't change. So I'd struggle in Nepal where there's a lot of rice, huh?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, like, in that question itself, does what the question is basically low carb, high fat, is that keto?
Yeah, look, I follow a ketogenic diet. Yeah, a keto diet. So yeah, but I don't recommend it for football players.
Definitely. So, like, I wanted to ask you, like, why do you follow keto? Like, when did you come across, or what pulled you towards it?
Look, like I said, one of my very good friends, a professor at the university I work with, he's an advocate of it. He studied it. We had a discussion about it, and then through his influence I started it. It was very hard at the start. I had no energy. I was tired and that sort of thing, but then my body adapted, and now a few years later I run every day. I have done a half marathon, etc. on this sort of diet, so I function quite well. And the beauty is, it's very good if you actually want to lose some weight.
Of course. So I have two more questions from the viewers before I move on to more lighter topics. These are out of my, I would probably not be able to frame these questions, which I got from my friends. So the next one is, are isometric loading exercises as effective as eccentric loading exercises for hamstring injury prevention?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You're getting some good questions from your friends. Look, I think isometric exercises with hamstrings do have some positive outcomes, but definitely the eccentric loading has been shown to be most positive. So I would go with the eccentric type loading on the hamstrings. However, you could incorporate some isometric work as well, but definitely the eccentric, what we call the Nordic hamstring raise, we can use that, and that's been shown through research to be quite positive. Actual fact, the leaders in that research area are from my university, so yeah, they've spent a lot of time studying hamstring injuries.
Of course, I think you have to clear some things for me and also for some listeners. What is isometric and what is eccentric?
Well, isometric is where there's no change in the muscle, so it's just holding the muscle. So if you can see what I'm doing now, if I'm pushing my hands together, I just hold it. That's isometric contraction. Eccentric is when we're lowering or lengthening the muscle. So what they're talking about there with the hamstring is that they would be lowering it. Okay, so where there's strain on the hamstring and the hamstring is lengthening.
So I just have a doubt: is cycling eccentric compared to running?
Cycling
Eccentric. Is cycling?
No, cycling has the components of concentric and eccentric, but it's mainly concentric. So it's mainly a pushing or a motion. So it's quite different. There is obviously an eccentric component. There's an eccentric component in running as well. So there's concentric contraction and eccentric contraction.
Of course. So I'll move on to the last question, and this is, what is VO2 max and how does it measure cardiovascular fitness?
Well, basically VO2 max is, as it said, it's our maximum oxygen capacity. So it's important in a sport such as football, what your maximum oxygen carrying capacity is, how big your aerobic system is. But it's an important measure. All right, but what's probably more important is how much of that capacity can you use? You could have a big VO2 max, and there's a lot of genetics involved in that. But if you can't use it all, okay, then you've got a problem. We've got to train that. On the same token, if you only have a very small aerobic capacity, that could be a problem as well. So a football player, most elite football players have, quite a significantly sized aerobic capacity, and because they've got there's that continuous activity. In actual fact, the athletes that have the highest VO2 max recorded are normally cross-country skiers.
Of course, I picked up a word from what you said, and it's maybe not what you meant, but you spoke of genetics. I wanted to ask, how much does that affect a player's ability?
In football, football has some genetic components in respect to your speed and your aerobic capacity. However, football is a pretty good game that genetics doesn't play a major part. So, say genetics, might, have an impact of 20%, 30%. I'm not sure. I'm just stating a number. But if you look at basketball, you look at the NBA in the States, you can see genetics plays a really big part, because if you're not tall, you've got to be an exceptionally good player in some respect. But if you're just 7 foot because of genetics and you can bounce the ball and move a little bit, more than likely you're going to be a bit of success in basketball. So football's a great game. All shapes and sizes can play it. But yeah, there's no doubt, in many sports, genetics has a big component. Like you and I can train all we want, but we're not going to win the 100 meters at the Olympics.
Of course, I wanted to ask you, you said, for NBA, if you're not genetically tall, you would be at a disadvantage compared to others. Have you ever come across a team where you had to train players according to their role? Suppose what role they play in the team. Suppose if you're not tall in an NBA team, maybe you would do some other parts.
Yes, but there's very few positions in the NBA that you can play when you're not tall. There's very few players that have been successful that are under, 6'1", 6'2". That 6'2", 6'3" is considered short. All right, so that's 186, 180, 188 is considered small. So that's a problem. Look, definitely in football, there's different positions. Like the side backs, the people out wide, they have to run a lot up and down, which is quite different to the central defenders that don't have to perform so much physical movement, etc.
Of course, so from the perspective of a player, maybe young or old, if you had to suggest how to maybe evolve the game, be more injury free, because I think that's the main aim of most scientists, sports scientists, to make the player injury free. What would you suggest? What should they do to maybe extend their career and come across less injuries?
Look, one of the biggest things that's a problem in football is that players aren't strong enough. So doing strength training will help this, and to have a very good holistic program, a well-structured program. But if you ask me that question, what could most football players get better at? I would say doing strength training and being stronger.
So how much of a difference does strength training do, help the player?
I think it makes a significant difference, because if you look at speed, the foundation of speed is strength, isn't it? Strength and then power and then speed. So if you're not strong, then your body, won't really carry you the way you need it to. So across Asia, one of the biggest things is people can increase and improve their strength.
Of course, so I'll move to a more personal note, and which is your most favorite team in the world in terms of football?
Look, I've always been a Liverpool supporter as a kid. I mean, that was who I primarily probably supported. So yeah, so that team. But most of the time, I really like teams that I'm actually working with, and at that time I'll support them. But I'd say overall it'd be Liverpool.
So yeah, talking about Liverpool, you have Klopp there, who is known for his high intensity playing. How much do the sports scientists have to work behind the scene for that to be achieved?
Yeah, look, he trains these people very hard. So a sports scientist would be working on managing the players and working with the physiotherapists to make sure that their fatigue levels are low, and giving good data to the coach, and to make sure that the team is doing what he wants them to do. So yes, a sports scientist would be working effectively with head coach, but he's a very, very good coach. So yeah.
Hopefully. So, I'll move on to the last question. If you were given the opportunity to work with one of these two players, whom would you work with? Ronaldo or Messi?
For me, I think of Ronaldo, because Ronaldo is, Messi is very fast and has been very successful. But you can see Ronaldo has, from an athletic perspective, he's a very good athlete, and he takes that side of the training very seriously. I would like to work with him to see how long he could play for. I think he could play well into his 40s and be successful still. So that's what I get great enjoyment out of, working with players to see how long they can play. One of my favorite players ever was an Australian player called Tim Cahill, played in 4 World Cups. And I worked extensively with him, and he retired at 39 or 40. I believe Tim could have gone on and played till he was 45, but I get great enjoyment seeing players play longer, because I think sometimes age is overrated as being a negative, and people, if they're interested, they could probably play a lot longer.
Of course. So I'll just sneak in one question that I got in. I'll take an example. You have someone like James Milner, who at this age right now is also still going and probably one of the most fittest of the team, one of the fittest players in Liverpool. And you have someone like Michael Owen, who kind of in his late 20s already was looking for retirement. Do you think they were just unfortunate with the injuries or fortunate with the injuries that they had, or was it something with the sports scientist team when they were young that, they did not work properly?
Look, it's very difficult for me to say, because I don't know the specific players. However, what you sometimes find is that, genetics might play a part in that. Often players that are very, very fast break down a lot more with injuries. And maybe they mightn't, there's the other reason that players don't do all the work that they're required from early in their career and don't manage themselves. And the other fact is maybe Michael Owen was just ready to retire, because you think a lot of people, they start playing at such a young age and they have a successful career and they might want to move on to other parts of their life. So I don't really know, but what I do know is sports science can help players play much longer, as long as they possibly want to play. If they want to keep playing, I get great enjoyment out of trying to help players extend their careers.
So, I'll ask one final question. It's in your career till now, which has been the most proudest moment in terms of football?
I would say Australia winning the Asian Cup in 2015 against South Korea, because it was in Sydney. It was in front of 85,000 Australians. It was the biggest trophy that an Australian team had ever won. We won it in extra time. We were the fittest team in the tournament. So that was a very proud moment. I enjoyed that very much. A club side I was winning won the Asian Champions League that I was working with, Western Sydney Wanderers. But I would definitely say the Australian national team. But, I also enjoyed very much working with the Iran national team and working with those people there and that. But I'd definitely say 2015, Australia winning the Asian Cup.
So on that note, Dr. Craig, thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best with your future endeavors. Maybe you can write one more book, or maybe you can work with Nepal. You never know. And
always, all you got to do is ask me, and I'm happy to help the people of Nepal anytime.
Sure. Thank you so much for coming, and take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you very much.